So this is Maya Kowalski. She appeared in court during the trial against Johns Hopkins Hospital, okay? So there was a whole movie done on her. I forget the name of it, but it was on Netflix. You can find it. It has her name in it, Maya. Okay, her mother committed suicide. So Johns Hopkins Hospital was found liable for that. But this goes even more farther, and it goes into a more disturbing pattern, and patterns with many hospitals that I don't think, if it's not addressed for accountability, that this equity, equity, and inclusion crap is not going to fix. It's a government system that nursing and medical professions are forcing down every hospital, and it is not the answer. It's going to be the death of healthcare, in my opinion, because somehow they think that this is the best. No, the best practice is honesty, okay? And yet the reason you haven't heard about this pattern with, and I'd say it's most of your university hospitals, the pattern, because you got to look it up specifically, then you find out the pattern. If you're looking for the media to tell you, forget it, because they're controlled by the government, the same government that's pushing the equity, inclusion, and equity crap. So basically what happened is when she was 10, she suffered this complex neurological disorder with her limbs. And so she had a neuropathologist or a neuropsychiatrist, neurodoctor, something like that. And he put her on ketamine for it, okay? And ketamine was working. Yes, it was working. But her mother had to take her to the emergency room one night because she was having numbness and tingling in her limbs. And yet then something happened while she was in the ER, and her mother said she needs a dose of ketamine. Can you please give her a dose? Well, the doctors and the hospital staff were like, no, that's crazy. She's giving her ketamine. No, we need to call family services. Worst thing to do, really. I mean, I get why healthcare has to do it, but this goes to a much larger problem, and that's with the DCFS system and it's not just this state, it's not just Florida, it's in Illinois, it's everywhere, because it's tied to federal, okay? And yet for some reason they put the worst people running this organization, and yet this Dr. Sally Smith, who was involved in this case, I'm going to show you how she was involved in others. So there's an overall pattern and problem here that that the healthcare system thinks that in 2020, because they came out and said we're doing our reckoning with racism, that somehow gets them off the hook. No, you need to start being honest and stop getting in bed with the government. That would be helpful, because then maybe you'd get away from the globalist agenda. So Beata Kowalski, her mother, was accused by Dr. Sally Smith that she was hurting her daughter, giving her ketamine, and they diagnosed Munchausen by proxy, which really is a false diagnosis these days. That's what it said in one of the articles. And so took her out of the home. This was so, grueling for the mother. She ended up committing suicide. And Dr. Sally Smith, the place she works for, they actually, before this family sued Johns Hopkins Hospital, before they sued them, they went after her and the place she worked for, and they settled for like $2.5 million. But they still went on to go after Johns Hopkins too, because they just called this woman in instead of listening to the mother, instead of looking at the history that no, there was a neurologist involved in this girl's case that was prescribing it. They just automatically assumed, no, she's being abused because we don't give ketamine for this. So this is an older picture. That's her mother who committed suicide. And yes, Maya was awarded $2.21 million, finding Johns Hopkins Hospital liable for this. So this Dr. Sally Smith, which some people are saying, not even sure she's a doctor, which that's disturbing enough. But putting that aside for a moment, like that she's maybe a psychologist, but not a medical doctor. This was another family, because there's been several families that their whole lives have been upended because of this woman. This is the Kushners. they had suffered because of her as well. Let me get to that. So when Elena, the mother here, went into labor with the little boy, it was a traumatic delivery. The umbilical cord was wrapped around the neck. So he ended up suffering damage, brain bleeds, and, you know, he was obviously in the NICU. She said that when they saw their son's face for the first time, it was blue and bruises dotted it and his shoulders. Because William's umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck. So then, like a few weeks later, there was the broken ribs, which were from the delivery as well, the traumatic delivery. And yet they brought this social services in, and she ended up saying that this Dr. Sally Smith, that she blamed them for egregious abuse, and yet they too lost the case because, again, she did not win. The judge sided with the Kushner, citing the state's inconsistent testimony and failure to look at the circumstances of the birth, that she had a traumatic birth. So they went through all of this crap, all because of somebody who's not even really a medical doctor, but I think she's like maybe a psychologist. And then there's also other people that have suffered. Tara Brown, 39, underwent 3 grueling rounds of vitro fertilization to conceive twins with her physician husband. She was accused of inflicting countless fractures on her 6-week-old infant, but the charges were expunged after another doctor diagnosed them with a rare bone disorder. And the reason I say this about Dr. Sally Smith not being a doctor is it has here, Dr. Smith, who the Kowalskis initially believed was a physician, was the medical director of the Child Protection Team in Pinellas County, which provides medical evaluations basically for DCFS. Okay, so she obviously, I'm not even getting to all the cases of people's lives she's ruined. And then that's why they made this documentary on Netflix. So Sally Smith told me that if I didn't tell them what was wrong, then my children would be put in foster care. She looked us straight in the eye and said, one of you is lying. One of you abused your children. Yes, she actually does education and has videos where she's saying it's always one of the parents that are lying. Well, if you go in with that attitude, then that's really that's just not a good healthcare worker at all, in my opinion. But that's what basically she taught. You can find the video. We have to ask a lot of questions to trip them up. She said at one presentation in 2015. Most of the time, they've thought of the main lie, but they haven't thought of all the details. So if you keep asking questions, the story falls apart. So she goes in with that attitude that they're all wrong, or that one of the parents is lying. And she's been found to be false in all these court cases. Yet they're still keeping her on staff, or she's retired, but she's still connected to Johns Hopkins. So it makes you wonder why they're doing this. Yeah, parents forced to defend themselves against Smith believe the extraordinary power of so-called child abuse pediatricians, a relatively new specialty, should be subject to more checks and balances. Because in most cases, she came in and took some pictures, but she didn't listen to what they said. Like when she's just not a professional, in my opinion. Also, a John Stewart, a Marine Corps veteran, spent 300 days in jail on Smith's allegation that he killed his girlfriend's son by throwing him repeatedly against a soft surface. Prosecutors dropped the charges after all of it was contradicted.